Hello, I'm Aretha. This time, I'll be playing around with AMD's Ryzen7 8700G, and I'll talk about it. This time, it is not a verification, but mainly my impressions after playing around with it. In the first place, famous people publish the FPS of each game. If you are looking for something like that, please note that the content may not meet your expectations. I bought it at a local PC shop on the day it was released. I was planning to buy 8600Gs until I went to the store, but then I realized I had bought 8700G. This is common in this industry. My impression after using it is that I'm glad I kept it at 8700G. The 8700G this time is an APU, so it has a nice built-in GPU. This internal GPU is iGPU. This is very high performance. According to the manufacturer's announcement, you can play games in full HD. It is said that it can be fully enjoyed at low image quality. This time I'm playing a video of Armored Core 6 in the background, and it works fine with low quality settings. I'm a bad player, so please don't touch on the details of the play. Regarding the BIOS settings, I only increased the memory allocation for iGPU from auto to 16 GB, but I did not change any other settings. When I played Armored Core 6 without making any BIOS settings, I noticed that the memory consumption seemed to be insufficient, so I increased the allocation in the BIOS. Armored Core 6 seems to consume less than 5 GB at most. Therefore, it cannot be said that the performance of the iGPU is fully brought out, but it is still possible to play Armored Core 6 comfortably by enabling AFMF. This performance with iGPU is astonishing. The effect of AFMF is also amazing. In fact, it would probably be difficult to play Armored Core 6 comfortably without AFMF. The frame rate that can be obtained with CapFrameX is the frame rate before being increased by AFMF. And the frame rate increased by AFMF can only be confirmed with Radeon software. The on-screen display on the right is displayed with Radeon software, and the on-screen display on the left is displayed with CapFrameX. Comparing each value clearly shows the effectiveness of AFMF. A brief explanation of AMD Fluid Motion Frames. This is a technology that complements the spaces between frames to increase the apparent number of frames when playing DirectX 11 or 12 games in full screen. As you can see, the frame rate has improved considerably in this game. In other words, it will be difficult to play without AFMF. I'm a little off topic, but I'll explain the environment. CPU is Advanced Micro Devices Ryzen7 8700G. Motherboard is Asus TUF Gaming B650M+. CPU cooler is Shenzhen Fluence Technology PC Cooler K4BK. Built-in Radeon 780M as well as GPU. I won't reveal the product name for now, but the memory is 64 GB with 232 GB memory cards. The bench stand has replaced the arc bed with a sledgehammer table. No performance impact. Other than that, it is the same as the previous Intel environment. As for the BIOS settings, as I mentioned earlier, I only increased the memory allocation for iGPU from auto to 16 GB, but I didn't change any other settings. Since PBO remains disabled, I think the behavior is the same as when combined with the A620 chipset. We played several games and bench games including Armored Core 6 in this environment. First of all, there are not bad points about this CPU, but I would like to tell you some points that I would like you to understand. I think it's a wild argument that you don't need a graphics board if you have this. These are my impressions after actually playing some games and benching. I think this CPU is similar to Honda S660 when compared to a car. S660 has no power, is small, and can hardly carry luggage. However, for those who can handle these factors, it is a good sports car that is light, small, has good fuel efficiency, and has a small turning radius. There is a comparison between Intel's 13th generation i5 and GTX 1650 in the manufacturer's announcement. It's true that in some games there are times when it exceeds 1650, but of course there are times when you lose. Of course, this is a comparison with AFMF enabled. In other words, the performance as a raw GPU is basically inferior to the 1650. Well, it's only natural since we're comparing iGPUs and graphic boards. And a very heavy game. Cyberpunk, Alan Wake 2, it's like Starfield, etc. In this class, the movements are quite difficult. This is an area where the average frame rate can reach 50 with AFMF enabled. Some people may think that if you get around 50, you can play the game. Of course you can't play it. However, some people may feel uncomfortable. And even though the official recommended low image quality setting is low image quality, it varies considerably depending on the game. Some games look pretty good even with lower settings. I haven't played it, but it seems like Resident Evil Remake 4 looks good even on low settings. Armored Core 6's appearance changes considerably when you lower the image quality. It's not that noticeable during missions, but the appearance inside the garage is noticeably worse. This low image quality setting varies considerably depending on the game, so you need to consider these points. Final Fantasy XV's bench looks pretty disappointing if you set it to low quality settings. I bought it thinking I didn't need a graphics card and ran it with low quality settings. It looks more disappointing than I expected, and it is difficult to operate when running heavy games. This is a level that reminds us that no matter how good the performance is, it is still an iGPU. The content seems to be a complaint about 8700G. So, is this CPU a bad product? That's not the case at all. I think it's a great CPU. I plan to install this CPU in the main machine once the settings are decided. From here on, it will be 8700G praise mode. I said earlier that it looks like an S660. If you can tell what I said earlier, it's an amazing CPU. To begin with, it's a combination of i5-13400 and GTX 1650 that are being compared, but the combined TDP of these is 140 watts. TDP of 8700 grams is 65 watts. Although the performance is inferior in direct comparison, it is doing quite well. Overwhelming power efficiency. In the first place, since there is one less part, it becomes easier to use a power supply with a smaller output. You don't have to think about the space for the graphics board, so it's easier to choose a small case. The heat generation is also reduced, so you can reduce the number of fans installed in the case and reduce the diameter. Very small computer is easy to assemble. Up until now, if you built a machine without a graphics board, it was almost impossible to run Cyberpunk 2077. If you build it with 8700G, it will work within the range of normal operation, and if you use Armored Core 6 with low quality settings, you can play normally without any problems. It's a small but powerful CPU, and there's nothing better than this when building a machine like this. I have a gaming machine separate from my main machine, so I play heavy games on that machine. However, even if you don't play games, there are times when you want GPU performance. In the past, you could buy cheap graphics boards for less than 10,000 yen. In this day and age, even the cheapest ones cost about 16,000 yen new. Well, it's something like ARC 310. Don't expect performance. When you run out of performance with your iGPU and want to add a graphics board, you try to buy one. The GTX 1650 shown for comparison costs about 20,000 yen. It's great that I don't have to buy this. When a small amount of GPU-related processing occurs on a virtual machine, I get frustrated immediately, but in my opinion, with this much iGPU performance, it probably won't be a problem for a while. There is not. Video editing is also easier with GPU performance. Of course, if you want to do it seriously, you'll need an RTX 4070 Ti or higher. I think that with this much iGPU performance, we can do a lot more. For the higher-end 8700G and 8600G, PCI Express 8 can be used for the graphic board, so you can also insert a graphic board in an emergency. The 8500G has a narrow PCI Express band, so adding a graphic board will not improve performance much. Think of the 8500G as a CPU for watching videos. How is it? Don't you think it's a good CPU? I think it's a very useful CPU. Also, this is something that only applies to some people, but I think it's very important, so I'll talk about it. This 8700G, I think it's the same with the 8600G as well, but there are a lot of parts that can be tweaked and it looks like it's fun. The Ryzen 8000 series is manufactured using a monolithic die, unlike the previous Ryzen 7000 series. This structure seems to increase the clock durability of Infinity Fabric. There is also information that there are 2,500 in the world. The memory controller also seems to be excellent, and reports of achieving DDR5-10000 were reported a few days after its release. This is just a limit value, so it cannot be used regularly, but I think the reason such information comes out within a few days of release is because the controller is excellent. It is my understanding that AMD's memory controllers are different from Intel's, and the memory clock is often difficult to increase, but the 8000 series seems to have greatly improved in that respect. Ryzen has various other frequencies, including Infinity Fabric, and you can overclock each of them, overclock the memory, and then overclock the CPU and iGPU, so I think there will be a considerable increase in performance. On the other hand, since it is based on a mobile CPU, I hope it is also strong in the area of low voltage. This is my hope regarding this. I had been playing around with the BIOS since I bought it, but I thought it would take a lot of time to mess around with so many settings, so I threw away the verification and started editing videos. If I had messed around until the settings were finalized, it would have been a month or so before I uploaded the video. What I've talked about so far often falls under overclocking, so if you actually try it, be sure to be aware that it voids your warranty. Is it me? No, you're bound to overclock, right? It would be a waste not to play with it when there are so many elements that can be played with. In the first place, the officially recommended settings are Infinity Fabric 2400 and DDR5 6400. Officially it says it only supports up to DDR5 5200. It's almost like the official is asking you to play with this. If you say something like that, you'll have no choice but to mess with me, right? If it burns out, you can just buy a new one. I think people with this kind of mentality will find this CPU very enjoyable. If you can't think of such things, we recommend that you use it at its rated value. Based on various things, I'm thinking of using 8700G as my main machine. I think it's a very convenient and fun CPU to use. Lastly, let's talk a little bit about skin temperature aware power management. This feature, called STAPM, was originally installed to prevent notebooks and handhelds from overheating. Unlike desktops, notebooks and handheld devices often come into direct contact with human skin. Of course, you can hold the handheld directly, and it is also possible to use it with a laptop placed on your thigh. In order to prevent dangerous temperatures in such cases, control is performed to reduce power consumption when heat generation exceeds a certain level. This is of course a necessary feature for notebooks and handhelds, but not for desktop CPUs. However, Steve from Nexus discovered that this control was effective for 8700G and apparently contacted AMD. AMD's response was that it would be fixed by updating a GESA at a later date. I verified it myself and was able to confirm that STAPM is indeed working. This is a graph obtained by acquiring the log of running Cinebench. The blue graph is the average value of the CPU clock. The red graph is the CPU power consumption. The yellow graph is the CPU temperature. In this graph, the power consumption and temperature go downhill around 183, and the CPU clock drops accordingly. For my individual, the effect on frequency is slight. The light blue graph is the value used to control STAPM, and if the CPU power consumption continues to be high, the value will gradually increase, and when it reaches the threshold, the CPU power consumption will be limited and heat generation will be suppressed. The power consumption is limited when the light blue graph reaches a peak, and thereafter the power consumption continues to be limited until the processing is completed. This time, I experimented with a load using Cinebench, but of course the numbers will be added due to iGPU load, etc. In other words, if you continue playing a game with a heavy load for a long time, the power consumption may be controlled. When I checked the numbers while actually playing Armored Core 6, I was able to see that the numbers gradually increased. This value seems to gradually decrease as the no-load condition continues. This graph is a log that continues to be logged even after the processing is finished under load with Cinebench, but as the no-load state continues, the numbers gradually decrease. If the load is applied again in this state, the CPU will probably continue to perform at its original performance without being restricted in power until it reaches the threshold again. I did see a decrease in CPU performance, but it was less than I expected. So I think it's a problem, but I don't think it's something to worry about that much. Let's wait for AMD to release a new AGESA. I'd like to release videos about Ryzen 7 8700G from time to time for a while. Recommended parts configurations, examples of various overclocking settings, lower voltage, etc. There are a lot of things I can do, so I'm going to do a lot of things. If you are interested in information about 8700G, please subscribe to the channel and wait for it. Thank you for watching till the end.